I think the topic that's coming up the most for us, like with our clients, is privacy and safety. So I think those are the biggest issues that we're hearing about now. And I think that the reason for that is, maybe not 25 years, maybe 5 or 10 years, the way that the world is being cataloged in terms of sort of image recognition, cameras, 3D mapping. I think AI and then robotics, right? AI is beginning to understand the world around it, the objects there, and being able to manipulate them and help you, right? So, robots that live in your home and assist you as you're aging. Mm-hmm. I think all that stuff is becoming real. Like if it's not done in the right way, I think it has the opportunity to create a lot of harm. And I think there's obviously massive potential, but I think a lot of the conversations we're having are about how do we do that in a responsible way.
I'm Sarah Nagle. I've spent my career leading research and product development within some of the world's largest brands.
And I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Verve.
And this is AI Powered by People.
Each episode will dive into the latest AI developments and talk to an industry leader to help you better understand and utilize AI.
We'll take you inside some of the world's most famous companies and share examples of how AI is improving innovation, consumer engagement, media, and marketing.
No matter what industry you work in, we'll help you navigate one of the biggest disruptions to organizations and people today.
Hey, Chad, how's it going?
Hey, Sarah. It's election day.
And you sound like you have a cold.
No. I was singing R&B hits this morning. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just screaming in the car.
Just going super low. Just staying super low. Just try to ease into today, right? A lot going on.
There's a lot going on. It's a big day. It's a very big day.
So this is the episode where we break down politics. Is that right?
This is it? All right.
This is it. Yeah, you've been waiting all year for it. And
Perfect. Yeah. Can you, we had an AI speakeasy in Cincinnati that I wasn't able to go to, but it sounded like a lot of the team went, and it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was right down the street from our office, Northside Distillery, kind of a craft, craft bourbon, all the fun stuff. Mm-hmm. So we had, I don't know, there's like almost 40 something people there. It was great. It was like 2 hours of talking about what agents are, how they get used, and then we rolled out a somewhat kind of secretive little mobile app we're working on, where they could build their own agents and collab on different business problems, and then talk about how they could apply it in their life. So, it looks like, I think I need an agent for my camera. It just went dark.
Technical problem.
Yeah. I don't know what happened. Yeah, the rails came off. I'm back. Yeah. See, it's a deep voice, just like soothes people, maybe.
Yeah.
It just
like put your camera to sleep.
Yeah. It's dead. I'm always really curious, what kind of agents people are building and why. And I think the beauty in, and obviously we haven't talked about it too much on this pod, so, but we're working on something pretty special that we think that, we want to launch here shortly. We're just doing a little bit of light beta testing on things, but, I think building agents can be a social thing. And if you want to talk to someone, I'm sure there's somebody else in the world that might want to talk to that person too. Mm-hmm. So cool. I think it's going to be exciting when we announce it.
I think it'll be fun, which I think is hopefully soon. So today, instead of an interview, we're going to be sharing clips from the panel that, Chad, you moderated a few weeks back during the Blink Creativity Summit in Cincinnati. The panel featured Richard Whitehall from Smart Design, Amanda Bolton from P&G, and Matthew Daler, who is a featured Blink artist. It was a really great conversation about the intersection of creativity and business and design. And it was a great session because they were all kind of coming from a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, so on a previous episode, we had Richard from Smart Design. So it kind of, if you watch that or listen to that episode, you'll get a better kind of sense for Richard. Matthew is a street artist, so kind of well known to go do lots of different kinds of murals all over, cities around the world. And it was interesting to hear his take on generative AI and how he's using it as a tool. And then you had a look inside of one of the largest consumer package companies in the world, Procter and Gamble, and how they're using, again, some of the similar tools to not do street art, but obviously do concepts, product concepts, ideas, things like that, and give you more ways to express ideas and do it a lot faster. So I think it's going to be a really interesting panel for people to hear about, this intersection of kind of like an individual who was building, larger than life artworks. You got Richard, who is building more universal design principles and new kinds of products and experiences. And then you have a CPG, kind of like an innovator inside of CPG, and how they're coming up with new products to take to market. So it's a really interesting discussion.
Yeah. So stick around for that. Again, we have lots of events going on. We've got more AI speakeasies coming up. November 12th in Seattle, November 14th in LA. We're going to be in New York the week of the 18th, 19th, and then November 21st in Boston. There's going to be some more events coming after that, but those are the ones that are coming up. You can head over to verve.com/events to check us out. And these events as well as others that are coming. All right, let's get to the headlines. We're going to invite back Rex Reportwell, who is our news agent that has, well, we can talk a little bit about Rex because he's evolved a little bit.
Yeah. Can we press pause a little bit?
Yeah.
So people who haven't been on, listen to the last episode, can you explain who Rex is?
Sure. Rex Reportwell is an AI agent that we created to be able to read the news. So he's got a very classic newscaster voice, and we've trained this agent in a way to be able to take the headlines that we're looking at and craft them in a way that presents it like you would hear on radio or TV. So originally trained Rex to be kind of this mix between a newscaster and comedian, and
he was pretty spicy.
He was pretty spicy. He was spicy, and the more and more we interacted with him, the spicier he got. So we did a little bit. We brought him to the shop, and we kind of we tweaked some things. We had Andrew on the team, who's excellent, who's been on a previous podcast. Take a look at popped the hood and took a look at Rex for us, so he wouldn't be as spicy. He still has a great sense of humor, but he's not. He doesn't.
Is he mild?
He's safe for work. We'll say
like a mild salsa.
He's
a pico?
Probably okay. More of a pico de gallo with some, maybe a few jalapenos here and there.
I guess we'll know when we find him.
Out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's have Rex read the first headline.
This just in. Whispers from the top suggest Amazon is aiming for a major Alexa upgrade. CEO Andy Jassy has hinted at a new agentic version of the popular voice assistant, one that can not only answer your questions, but take action on your behalf. Will this be the breakthrough Alexa needs to finally turn a profit, or another expensive experiment?
I guess the first thought was people still have Alexas at their house. It was my first thing.
Yeah? I think I have 4 of them.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't. Maybe it was just maybe it's me. Maybe this is the reason I'm in New Hampshire. It's kind of I'm retreating from the world. But we had one, and I'm I do not like how this is listening to me. That part of it I didn't love that much. And I, talking to some folks, I feel like some people kind of pulled back their Alexas or kind of put it in a drawer for a while. Yeah. So anyways, that was my first thought on it. Also, but interesting too, that, we work in agents, we're the agents all the time, and it makes complete sense that it's a physical manifestation of the interactions that we're talking about all the time.
Yeah. So let's talk numbers. So we've got over a fourth of total U.S. households have Alexa devices.
Mm-hmm.
As of 2023, over 500 million Alexa-enabled devices, which is pretty astounding, right? And then you have Alexa being used, reported hundreds of millions of times each week to control over 400 million smart home devices. And I know, some of the reports that were coming out, the kind of managing the lights was like a key thing that they were working on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really just the form factor, because when you look at, like, they're number 3 in the market behind Apple and Google.
Mm-hmm.
And, the others are on smartphones compared to, Alexa's on a screenless, speaker
Mm-hmm.
for some of the,
Yeah.
For some of the manifestations of how it comes to market. But I think it's different. I think like you have a different experience with a screenless speaker than you would your phone.
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, you also, it's, different with your phone, and everyone has like a personal, a relationship with their phone too. Like you bring it with you everywhere. And it just, so when it's in your home, the interactions are inherently different, and the things you're asking it to do feel very, very different.
Yeah.
And much more like family or home based, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, how do you imagine that you would, so if it's going to be an agentic experience within the Alexas, and you've got 4 across your house,
Yeah.
what do you think that will feel like?
I don't think it'll feel very different from how I use it today. That's just
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the big opportunity is for Spotify to come up with an AI driven speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would use that, and I would move. I mean, I hook my Spotify up to,
Yeah,
to
Alexa.
Alexa, Google speakers anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just feels like they could do something a little bit more innovative.
Spotify could.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would use it. I would use it if it was Spotify, because that feels like it's like a contained type of thing, where it's also something I interact with all the time. I'm always on my Spotify, whether it's listening to podcasts or if it's listening to music, and that feels like in the place I would love for it to be, like all over my, like when I'm home, I'd love to have it all over my home, but to also like have to be able just to like to talk to it and say like, this is what I'm thinking about, or like I'm about to, or if it hears me like start to like vacuum or clean or something, like it knows that that's the type of music I'm looking for in those experiences. Like, so it could potentially through music make my home smarter, to get to know me and get to know my patterns. I think would be really cool. I think that would make me feel, because it's about music and it's about listening and it's about that type of experience, but not everything else that Amazon would bring into my house, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm curious on. Obviously we'll be in Seattle in a couple weeks time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll have I think there were a couple Amazon people who signed up,
Mm-hmm.
but it'll be interesting to see how the relationship with Amazon could change, through these different form factors. I mean, I know they introduced Rufus. Kind of like your shopping AI, which kind of threw me for a loop, because I'm like, well, why wouldn't you just have Alexa be the, the agent here and connect the dots? But the answer was no. It's going to be Rufus. And maybe they're friends. We'll see. But I don't know. I use my Alexa primarily to control the mood in the house.
Meaning
and
music.
It's like a soundtrack for our home. And like whatever vibe we want to feel.
All right, let's hear what Rex has for our next headline.
Hold on to your hats, folks, because Meta's making moves in the robotics world. They're teaming up with Gelsight and Wonik Robotics to develop a robot hand with human-level tactile sensing. That's right, this hand can not only grip, but it can also feel heat, vibrations, even odor. Now, before you get any ideas about robotic masseuses, this technology is aimed at AI researchers, not consumers. Still, it's a fascinating development that could lead to some truly remarkable breakthroughs in how AI interacts with the physical world.
He's a little soft.
Yeah. What do you mean?
We might have to up him. Like can we go medium?
Medium. Next time we'll do medium salsa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll do medium salsa.
All right.
Well, this is interesting. Having a robot that can actually feel. I thought it was interesting too that not only feel, it could smell too. So there's like additional senses within it, which makes it really interesting to think about it now. I know it's not a consumer product, but you can, kind of like what we were just talking about with Alexa or any sort of like AI, agentic AI in your home. If the robot or whatever the physical manifestation of it is, that it could like sense more than just like hearing, like you talking to it. I don't know.
Did you see the picture?
Yeah.
Like the fingertips?
Yeah, I did.
So for listeners, if you can visualize like a thimble, if you're sewing, which I know, Sarah, you probably do a lot, making pot pies and sewing things, but just think of like a smart thimble, that you wear. And I can just imagine, handing, I know that they said like, hey, this is for research, and which is what you're supposed to say before you launch it to the consumer. But I think, giving it, I'm just imagining seeing these on people's hands, because you're going to need to train the models on this. So similar to what you'd see Google cars driving around with cameras, or Waymo and SF, seeing these out in the wild as people are training them on all different tactile surfaces. And
yeah, I'm just like imagining people just like touching walls, and like it's going to become a very kind of like sensory, like for the folks that get to do that. How cool. Like just basically like explore the world with like through new senses, or I think that's really, really cool. I think, and I just think that like, imagine when that does, come into your home or is part of, these experiences that you have, like if it could sense certain things, or if it's, it feels a certain temperature, or if it smells something weird, or, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's, maybe even before you can, like people can, it becomes really interesting.
Oh, I think it's awesome. It reminds me of kind of way back in the day when we were doing more like trend reports and kind of cool hunting new and interesting ideas. There was the bear hug vest, where it was like it was for kids with autism that parents would buy, and it was a weighted vest that had a remote control, and then you could give your kids hugs while they're away from you. And it just reminds me, it just brings back kind of the ideas around that, where you can send sensations to people, just to communicate presence and all different kinds of things. So I'm excited about what that could do. Right. So it's like a fingertip or a glove or a shirt.
All right. Last up in the headlines.
Well, folks, it seems OpenAI is shaking things up again. ChatGPT is getting a major upgrade, and this time it's bringing search results to the party. That's right, the chatbot can now access real-time information from the web, giving you instant answers to your burning questions, complete with links to sources. Is this the end of traditional search engines as we know it, or just another step in the evolution of how we find information?
My dog's very interested in it.
Yeah.
We can hear
Was
that.
he jealous of the balloon dog?
He must have been. That's probably why he's freaking out right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's the next evolution. We saw this coming. I don't know. I feel like people want to use it that way anyway. They want to use it for real-time information. They want to use not only like, ask questions with different prompts or, build things, but also just like what's happening. It makes sense.
Yeah. Have you made the jump yet from like you used to go to Google to search for something and now you jump into an AI platform?
I don't use any other AI platforms right now other than Verve. And
well, you can do like /web.
So
right?
Well, see, that's what I've been doing kind of for us. Yeah. I spend most of my time in there, or if it's like a news article, I'll like do the scrape tool or, to kind of get the summary. But that's how I have been. It's a different way of getting news, as well as like my podcast and all that stuff. But as far as like web searching, I don't feel like I'm doing that as much.
I don't feel like I am either. No, I mean, I'm not really using Google search that much. Like not, I don't know, maybe like once a day, maybe. But that's crazy.
I know it is crazy because you think about all the things you used to like. I used to ask it everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen to it.
I don't know what's going to happen to it either. Because you think about like all of those questions and all that stuff you're asking, like at any, in the middle of the night, like what was that movie or whatever the thing is that pops in your brain, or you're at a party and like, oh, what was that actor that, whatever. All of that is data that they're collecting about us. And like, that's going to start to go away. Like what, I don't know. They must be freaking out a little bit because, if you're turning to different platforms that are smarter, that you can interact with, you can take that information and do so much more with. Like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Gen Alpha, Gen Z are just going straight to TikTok and search through TikTok. So
yeah.
I don't know. We're already old school using Google search.
Yeah, we are, so. I guess. Yeah. We're old school using AI to figure out our news. Oh, well. All right. Well,
can we do Rex as a Gen Alpha next time?
Sure. Let's do that. That's a great idea.
Like two word answers.
Yeah.
Nope.
No. Well, you wouldn't be. Well, yeah, it would be kind of a funny. Like, how would a Gen Alpha present the news? Let's give it a go. Let's try it. Let's do it.
All right.
All right, let's get to the panel discussion that the panel that you moderated at the Blink Creativity Summit in Cincinnati. Again, is featuring Richard Whitehall from Smart Design, Amanda Bolton from P&G, and Matthew Daler, who is a featured Blink artist. And it's a really great discussion around the intersection of creativity, business, and design. You ready?
Let's go.
Over the last 20 years, I've just been a lifelong entrepreneur. Started like 4 different companies, sold 3, kind of on my 4th one. And in every company or new venture that we launched, it was always living at the intersection of creativity, business, and design. And so what we wanted to do is just have an open discussion around really just like some of the impacts that creativity is under and strategies under, from the advancement of AI and lots of different types of tools that have caused quite a disruption, I would say, to not only what we do every day, but also to businesses and also to agencies. And so we have an esteemed panel who've come together, I'd say like representatives of like 3 different kind of facets of these 3 worlds who've come together and to share a candid conversation. And what we wanted to do is kind of start with some questions, but also leave it open at the end where you have time to ask as well. Why don't we go down the line and kind of start a little bit about yourself and then kind of the connection to Blink.
My name is Matthew Daler. I own Chroma Projects, which is one of the Blink artists this year. I'm painting that. I'm installing and painting the G. Horton murals that you'll see cascading down Vine Street. The company paints interior and exterior murals for all kinds of companies, large and small. So we'll create anything that's out there.
My name is Richard Whitehall. I'm a partner at Smart Design, which is a design consultancy based in Brooklyn, New York. So we're all about really like transforming what's possible, and that could be very small things in people's lives. So we've done a lot of work in sort of household products. We helped to start a company called Oxo Good Grips that designs sort of kitchen gadgets, but inspired by people with arthritis and professional chefs to create products that work for everybody. And then some of the things that we transform are big innovation programs for companies that are trying to tackle really complex problems that are important for the future. A lot of the work we're doing in AI is working with big tech companies and thinking about the influence of AI on people's lives, how we can sort of create AI in a way that's responsible and helpful, and also building it into kind of physical experiences. So we're working a lot in sort of smart glasses, in kind of appliances that live in your home that might be listening to you or might be looking at you, and what happens with all that data. So great to be here.
My name is Amanda Bolton. I am an innovation designer in Procter & Gamble. So local company, this is the company that brings your lovely brands like Bounty, Charmin, Always, Pampers, Tide. Those are just to name a few. Pantene, Secret Old Spice. I feel like everybody probably has a product in their house that we create. I'm an innovation designer for Procter & Gamble. The innovation group that I work for, it is called the Transformative Platform Technologies. We have our brands, we have our OUs, and then we have our corporate functions. So I look across all of our brands, all of our OUs, servicing technology to them. And obviously, as a designer, we look through the consumer lens, the technology lens, what is our business lens, and then create propositions that hopefully all of you will love.
So why don't we start with, everybody's kind of seen the headlines over the last couple years with what generative AI is doing to different industries like art, entertainment, and I'm just curious, like, what is your candid feeling around, AI in general, but also how you might be using it today?
So my general feeling is that, to me, it's another tool. We were kind of talking about this beforehand. Just like the camera, just like the video camera, just like Photoshop, it's just another asset, something within our toolkit. I think for me, as an artist or painter, designer, it's really helped my source material in some ways, using it to generate imagery or source material for reference. That's definitely where I've used it, or in correction of imagery. Using stock images is like sort of wore its path out. You would paint a stock image or buy a stock image and then travel to another country and see it somewhere else, and that was like really disheartening. Or like you would, your own Google images never quite make it. I wish they were a little to the left. I wish they were a little to the right. If you don't have those sort of tools to like set up your own sort of studios and shoot things in a professional way, I think this was just an outlet for me as an artist to use it for creation.
If I can double click on it a little bit, and we'll go down the light. But what in your creative process, how are you can you name specific tools and just how you're thinking about it?
Midjourney is definitely what I've been using. All different variations too. I'll like back up in versions. So I might use the most current beta version or switch backwards to get different, maybe more crass results from earlier models. And then Remini, which we were talking about earlier, which is like an online sort of upload for image correction. So getting a really crappy, blurry image might clean that up a little bit for a painting reference. Specifically for me, I was like an old image of someone that really doesn't exist. It's all crinkled and ruined. I can like clean it up and have a cleaner representation to paint from.
So the work that I do in the TPTs, so we do a lot of consumer research, because we have to create a lot of ideas, and then we have to validate that of whether or not people love these ideas. So in our process, usually when a designer would go into consumer research, the process was we would go in with a hypothesis, and then maybe we would come with stimuli. Stimuli is another word for concepts, sketches, mood boards, whatever your product is that you would bring to research. And then you would talk to consumers, you would learn what they liked, what they didn't like, you would translate that to an insight, you'd have to go back to the drawing board, recreate more stimuli, and you would have this iterative process over and over and over, learning you were wrong. Right? And we want to celebrate learning that we were wrong, but we want to do that faster. So what generative AI allows us to do is it allows us to co-create with consumers live, and we can do it fast. So a process that might have taken weeks or months, we can do it in sometimes minutes, which is one of the ways that we're using generative AI. I love to use a lot of different tools, starting with Midjourney. I love to use Adobe Firefly. I like to go into Google Imagen or Imagen, whichever we want to call it, Dolly. And
I don't think they know.
I'm Google Imagen, Google Imagen. And then you use other tools that make those tools better. So what is really interesting and why I like to use multiple tools is the more and more you get to know the tools, you know the data that they were trained on, so the images and the words and the things that they were trained on, and then you start to get to know the models. So it's almost like mathematical equations or a chemistry experiment or you're cooking. You get more familiar with the ingredients that you're putting into it, and so that's why I like to use multiple tools, because sometimes I have different needs. So that's where I start to layer them.
I've heard generative AI or AI described as an alien life form, and I think it's an interesting metaphor, because I think in like 2020 when GPT dropped, this thing appeared that had these amazing capabilities that people hadn't really used. They didn't know how it worked, and I think at that period we did a large research study with 70 sort of creative people working across different fields to understand how they were feeling about it, to help our client kind of launch it in a way that would be intuitive for people, and also respect some of their fears. And I think at that point there were a lot of fears about, people being replaced, about being able to create things, quickly, a lot of fear, but also a lot of excitement about the kind of possibilities. And I think what's happened over the last 3 years is that people have started to get to know this alien life form and sort of understanding that it's not a person, it's not something that's going to replace them. It is something that offers a different perspective and maybe a different way of thinking and can be a partner. I think it can be a collaborative partner in creativity. So I think that's been the journey. In terms of the different tools that we've been experimenting with, I think there's because we've been doing research, we've kind of used all of them, but I think text to text, I think a lot of the things we've been doing are kind of putting images in and sort of evolving them as opposed to doing text prompts. And I think just the tools are getting more collaborative and there's more ways to interact with them, and I think that's what's really exciting. I guess I'll just summarize it in that, we've been using a lot of different tools, and I think what we've noticed is the interfaces are becoming sort of more evolved so that we can communicate in more ways than just text prompts. So we're kind of moving from DOS into visual interfaces and things that are more intuitive for creative people to use.
And with using AI today, this idea of time is kind of gone. And so I guess how do you look at that? I'm not sure how you guys are charging, so not like you need to roll out your pricing model for us, but I'm just curious because it's usually how you would scope out projects is here's how much time it's going to take, here's how much physical people are going to be involved in the project. It's 8 weeks and you had to lay out the whole scope, where now you could literally generate the entire project timeline through AI. It could scope it for you, it could say even who needs to be involved, and how do you look at charging for that? Because we're right in the midst of it.
Yeah, I guess my sort of overall take is that, to design something is easy, to design something good is actually really difficult. And I think maybe the thing that hasn't changed is that with AI, you can't just go from the beginning to the end in one step. You still need to go through an exploration process. You need to involve people. You need to agree on things. So all those kind of human aspects are still there, and it's surprising. I think especially working as a consultant for a long time, you realize that those human processes of bringing people along on the journey are really important, and especially in large companies. So I think the time just ends up getting used in a slightly different way. And there are still moments where we need a lot of control over the craft, where we might be using AI in one way, whereas at the beginning of the process where we're trying to ideate, we kind of want it to be more creative and broad. So I know it's a bit of a roundabout answer, but I think there are still steps, and I think there's still the kind of interaction with the client that's actually really valuable.
I'm going to share a very vulnerable story that actually highlights this. So before I realized there was all these amazing design generative AI tools, so this would have been about 2.5 years ago, I was working with an agency, and we do a lot of work in-house, and we also do a lot of work with agencies. And I was preparing some work that I was doing with this external group, and we were getting really tight on a deadline, and I hadn't seen concepts yet. And I was 2 days from presenting to my band 5, my director of the group, and my agency was saying, trust us, we will get you the concepts, it'll be fine. I'm like, there is no way that you're gonna be able to sketch all of these concepts out in a high enough fidelity with all the designs that we had discussed. And the night before, they delivered with excellence, and I thought, this is magic. What is going on? And then they shared with me, so again, before I knew about generative AI, that they were using a tool called Stable Diffusion. They were able to train it on their sketch styles, and they were able to use these prompts and then create them as underlays, and then they finished out the designs in Photoshop and some other sketching tools. So communicate that with your groups that you're working with, of how you're using the tools, what tools are you using, because in the past, this would have been something that would take multiple weeks. And so I was already having conversations with my management team of, I don't think this is going to get delivered. So that wasn't being communicated, and that's so important.
What did they charge? Now you don't have to ask the number, but just
It was, I mean, it was the expected amount.
Right.
Right. And a few of those case studies have popped up, which prompted me to learn more about these tools, because I do think the pricing model will change if we're giving, let's just say it's a month-long design brief, and the output is something that you're using generative AI for, and you're getting the same amount that you would have gotten before, that price point should come down. However, if you're giving me more than what I asked for before, or you're able to spend more time solving the real problem, there's a quote out there about, if you have an hour to solve for a problem and you spend, 50 of those minutes working on the problem itself versus the solution, it's going to be a better output, right? That is a paradigm shift. So if you have your teams that are actually spending more time solving for what's important, what the consumer wants, the actual problem as opposed to the solution, that's a different model, and it's still worth a lot of money and a lot of value. Things are changing, right? Just transparency and communication are going to be the goal.
Right. You mentioned ethics a little bit before, but I guess as a creative, one of the, I don't say like the core tenet of what makes you good or not, I'd say it's like part around your sources of inspiration and then taste, like kind of at the end. As a lot of different models they're trained on lots of other works that aren't necessarily their own. Just curious how each of you feel about the idea of training data, and if it was discovered that like it was trained on your data, does that change your feelings about the outputs that you're getting?
For me personally, I don't think like that. Like that, if it was trained to spit out what we kind of talked about that. I was like, if it makes X thing, or I think artists that felt threatened by that, they were like, this thing is just generating this thing that I make. It's more than just generating that. Like the thought, the concept, the idea, all of that stuff goes into the creation of the image that you still have to feed the AI. So it wasn't just like rudimentary. If it was trained on me, it might give me more the results better I want. Maybe I want it to be trained more on me to like play into my algorithms a little more as opposed to play the field. It might narrow down maybe what I'm actually going for if it knows always what I'm going for.
Right.
From a competitor advantage, not a competitive advantage. So obviously we wouldn't want assets being used in negative ways. We wouldn't want our assets contributing to someone else's IP, which I think we'll talk a little bit about today. But I think the win for us would be to have models that are trained on our brands and our brand assets, because then those, to your point, it becomes more usable on the back end. And I think Adobe Firefly? It might have been, they just launched or released the capabilities within their AI tools to actually build in your own brand assets. And I mean, for companies who have equity in their brands, like, that's gold. So that's a good thing, but it's a good thing when you're using it. And obviously we wouldn't want our brands to be used in a negative way.
Right.
Because when we think about the data that these tools are trained on, there's a lot of conversation from designers. And when we talk about IP, well, you can't have IP on, products of generative AI. Well, as designers, you can't create something from nothing. There's always inspiration, and that inspiration exists. So it's a different way of existing and pulling inspiration from it, and that's what the tools are doing. So it's wild, wild west of IP. So we'll see where that goes. But right now, yeah.
We're going to open it up for questions. So just kind of think of any questions that you have. But I wanted to see if you had to make predictions of the next 25 years, which might seem like a long time, but probably not. What are some predictions that you would make around how business is going to change, how creativity is going to change, how your life might change?
I am going to come in a little bit of the IP landscape. So IP, intellectual property, that means copyright, that means trademark, it also means design and utility patents, right? That's the life force of the industry. Last year, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the comic book Zara of the Dawn. So last year it came out. Originally, I believe the author's name, Chris Castanova. She was able to get copyright patent on her character that she designed in Midjourney, and she wrote this really thoughtful comic book. Well, they revoked that copyright because they said generative AI, there is no creativity in it, or you're too far away from the creative process, and it has to be created by a human. Okay, so that's an interesting news, right? But I want to rewind a little bit, because to predict the future, sometimes you have to go in the past. So in 1882, the camera, like our cameras that we use today, that had already been created, but it started coming into mainstream. And there's a famous case with Oscar Wilde, the famous writer. He had a series of photos that were taken by a famous lithograph. I believe his last name was Sarony. So these photographs were then being published somewhere. And Sarony, the photographer, sued and said, hey, wait a minute, you can't use my pictures. So they took that to the court case. And at the time, the camera, because it was a device and it was not done at the hands of an artist, you could not own copyright on a picture. But what they did is they looked at this picture that Sarony created, and he had created this beautiful composition of Oscar Wilde and, dressed him in a certain way and had all these really interesting things happening in the photograph. And then they took a picture that some random passerby took of Oscar Wilde in a coffee shop. And they compared the two pictures, and they said, yep, the coffee shop picture is just an artifact of Oscar Wilde. It just took a picture of him and he exists. And the picture that Sarony took had creative intent, very intentional intent. Now today, we can't have ownership over what comes out of generative AI. But I think very soon we will be able to prove creative intent behind those tools, which then I think will help that come even more into mainstream media. And I mean, maybe generative AI will be the next camera, maybe in 5 years. I don't know, I can't even predict what 10 years would be, but I think a lot more people will be using it in mainstream.
I think the topic that's coming up the most for us, like with our clients, is privacy and safety. So I think those are the biggest issues that we're hearing about now. And I think that the reason for that is maybe not 25 years, maybe 5 or 10 years. The way that the world is being cataloged in terms of sort of image recognition, cameras, 3D mapping. I think AI, and then robotics, right? AI is beginning to understand the world around it, the objects there, and being able to manipulate them and help you, right? So, robots that live in your home and assist you as you're aging. Mm-hmm. I think all that stuff is becoming real. And like, if it's not done in the right way, I think it has the opportunity to create a lot of harm. And I think there's obviously massive potential, but I think a lot of the conversations we're having are about how do we do that in a responsible way, because we're not going to be able to escape. We can't turn off the screen. Like, we're going to be in that world where things are happening around us. So I think that bar is getting even higher.
Matthew, prediction before we open it up?
The future is regulated. That's all I got.
Is that a t-shirt?
I mean, I just feel like it's just, I think that, like, we keep talking about this Wild West, and it's fun right now, and it's like mind expanding, and we're learning so much, but I just feel like we can't avoid regulations, whether that's coming within ourselves as a creative community or government or whatever it happens to be. It's I don't know what that is. Maybe it's not quite as restrictive as I feel it will be. But I've been just kind of waiting for the hammer to come down on limitations. We talked about it in terms of prompting, or like the prompts it would give and say, no, it won't do that. And I'm like, no, but context, right? Like the context for what you're using it for and how you're using it. So yeah, I think a regulatory body is going to exist, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, add to that it's like regulatory, but it's also like the social norm.
Sure.
Like, what's acceptable? Like, if I'm a student, do I always need to divulge that my work is generated in AI? If I'm wearing glasses that have cameras in them, should people know or not?
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of schools have policies now, like specific policies about the use of AI. So that's already regulated.
I want to open it up. We've got microphones here, don't we? Yeah? Oh, these are the microphones. All right.
We'll just share one and send one out.
Yeah. We got to put on layaway.
We'll send one out.
Yeah, so does anybody have any questions for our group?
One of the biggest threats I see is not the design and creative community seeing the threat of AI taking over our work, taking over our jobs, but other people, our partners, our clients, whoever it might be. How do you explain to them that a generative AI, whatever it might be, in the hands of designers is better than generative AI in their hands or in the hands of your accountants?
For me, that's like a quality control thing, right? Compare and contrast. Showing them how I can use it as this tool. That's how I would answer that. It's just like quality control. It's kind of like showing you, right? Helping you understand how I'm using it versus how you can do it by yourself. But not revealing all the secrets. Like they can make their own, they can put in their own prompts, but they're not going to be the prompts that I'm going to put in based on their vision because of my creative experience.
If you look at all the news about the consulting world this year, I think there has been a massive amount of disruption. You know, we work in a lot of physical experiences, so there is a side to it where maybe it's a bit slower to adapt to some of the trends than like other areas. But you know, overall, I mean, we're trying to design things that are helping people, and like I think we can accelerate parts of the process, but we've got to bring the client on that journey of understanding that maybe there are things out there that people don't even realize that they have a need for, and that we can find those things through like empathy and through like the craft of you know, being a designer. And I don't think that part is going to go away, but I think the process is going to look a little bit different. But I think like fundamentally following some of those processes and patterns, I think is still going to be valuable. Maybe it'll be a business that looks different, but I think there'll be something in there.
Cool. We got another question.
But to what extent do you feel people can still take ownership over something that was partially or fully or whatever generated by, like I know you said you use it for ideation, which like I do as well as an artist, I understand that. And I would never consider that like, oh, this was AI generated, but like then some people use it to further extent or like use it to an extent and then like edit back, or I guess what are your opinions on that?
So my rule of thumb, so because I work in upstream innovation, I am designing for an insight. So it's very different than designing for something that goes to market or on shelf. So by me designing for an insight, I have less risk from the IP space of generating and creating ideas because it's going to change 20 billion different times before it makes it to shelf. But my recommendation is if you are creating the next iconic brand asset or the next if you're creating your comic book character, at the point in which you think, I'm getting somewhere really good, stop using the generative AI tool. Make sure you document why you're making the decision to stop the tool and then edit your characters or edit your brand asset or edit the move or whatever it is, and document that, because that's kind of proving your creativity, and that's what's going to be so important if you go for copyright. So even if you do use your generative AI tools and you use them very intentionally and you're making very intentional and unexpected prompts, so you're not just saying, oh, create a sustainability life cycle analysis graphic, right? That's so generic. But if you say, I'm creating with these icons and the icons look like this and it's this color and it's this circle, on a separate sheet, write down why did you make those design decisions, because that's what you're protecting. That thought process is what you're protecting. So when you get there, like, this will be the next iconic thing, then kind of take a step back and just do some record keeping. So that would be my recommendation on that.
Using generative AI, which I agree is an outstanding tool, what talents do you see as emerging as the next art form? Are they philosophers? Are they writers? Could they now be the next excellent designers or artists?
Psychologists.
Wow, yeah, psychologists or writers.
I think that's such a core skill that they don't necessarily teach you in design school. They have some like intro to psychology classes, but all design is about feeling and behavior. And I think it's just understanding, having those skills. I mean, we try to use design thinking as teaching classes to everybody who's not a non-designer to kind of think like a designer. It was mostly having empathy, but I think now this kind of like, what are you doing, thinking, and feeling? Feeling is going to be the thing that's driving behavior in the future, and I think anybody who's in art or design is designing for feeling. It's designing for how you want to, you go through it and you're like, that made me cry, that made me feel something, you don't forget it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say just to build on that, I mean, like I think AI doesn't create meaning. It like creates artifacts and we create meaning, right? We look at those things and we infer something. And I think that's really important to remember, because I think as a designer, you are trying to create something that means something to someone else. And I think that maybe that side of it is going to be the thing that's going to really stick.
I do think the role of the designer is the problem solver. And I don't think that goes away. We have a unique ability to connect unexpected dots. So I'm still looking for those people. I want people who are so curious and always want to see, okay, what's the next thing? And I don't think that changes. I think what does change is the role of design. We spend so many years in design school to be able to communicate that idea effectively to your stakeholder, to many people. I think that reduces, but the problem solvers and the connectors, that doesn't change.
We think about this in a bigger system that is focused on efficiency, low quality, high distribution, high extraction of profit, that might make the human component very different, because AI isn't just a tool, it can actually replace human beings. It probably will at some point, so it's more like an emerging entity as opposed to previous tools that needed humans. This might not need humans at all. So how do we think about it in that context?
I mean, I guess from my point, I'm a designer. I'm not sure I can disrupt the whole system, but I do think that on a day-to-day basis, there are people who can benefit from the things that we design. We can empower them to do things, and we can advise companies to use their products in a responsible way. So, I mean, it's not going to totally change everything, but I do think we can have an impact. And I do believe that at least the people that I work with are trying to be very responsible and careful in how they're doing things. But yeah, they do live within a capitalist system. They are competing against other companies. There is a massive amount of capital that is captured in a few companies. I mean, those are definitely issues. Again,
Because I work in consumer research, I'm not sure that I could ever replace the voice of the consumer with an AI. I can help co-create and live do co-create stimuli creation, but it's never right. And maybe some point a really smart engineer is going to create the right algorithm and model, and then we're going to get the right data to train it, and maybe it will be right. But I don't think the consumer or the person and the decision maker, who would be me in this case, that finds those insights would be replaced there. And I also like to think about, I know we talk about AI, it's this huge umbrella, but generative AI, I think about it very simply. And I think the more we can educate people just on what generative AI is, think about it as like a recipe. You're cooking something. You have data. That's your ingredients. Data are the pictures and the words that the machine is trained on to find patterns, because that's all it really is doing. It's finding patterns. Good people who are good with patterns would be a good one too. Then you have your models and your algorithms. The models are, what are the things that I can do to the ingredients? I can cook it, I can bake it, I can do all these things, I can synthesize it, I can quantify it, I can do all these things. Then you have your algorithms, which are like the recipes. How does all that come together? And then your output, which is the food, is only a prediction. So I think the more we can educate people on how simple it can actually be, I have to have faith that there are always going to be really smart engineers who are going to figure out how to use it in the best way. So I think education is point one, and that will maybe help us to not get to the dark side of things.
I think there's a huge opportunity in front of us who are builders, to create, to this new species, this new entity type. We're still exploring what this looks like, what this feels like. Big companies shouldn't own it. You should own it. Does this exist in your home, like where all your data goes to? Do your walls become sensors? Is your family automatically connected? Do all your family members have different account types, so you're all plugged into the same AI? Is that where your calendar live, your finances live? Like, I think that's where it's headed towards, is like it's your AI for your family, your last name, your legacy, your family tree. It's plugged into all these different things. I think there's a huge opportunity in front of us to create that world. I mean, we live in a society where we don't really know like our grandparents or our grandparents' grandparents. We've lost our history. We've lost all these things because we can't touch it, feel it, sense it. We have films, we have photos, but it doesn't do it justice. I think the opportunity in front of us is to create these systems that can function like us, and we can ask questions. It's asking your dad questions you can't get up the courage to ask, but you want to know. And I think that's where AI could help us, is to give us a conversational interface where we can get true answers. And I think on that note, I'm giving the signal to wrap it up. So, but thank you. Thanks for our esteemed guests for coming in to talk about this. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Yeah.
I thought one of the interesting things is that, we're in the middle of an evolution of generative AI. So within like PNG walls, and then also on the street art side, a lot of the Gen AI use cases are still generating artwork or generating visuals. And then, kind of this next wave is all going to be around agents, which, hasn't necessarily swept kind of through. So it'd be interesting to go back in 6 months and see how they're using Gen AI differently, because this next wave, all the stuff that we're building, kind of take, more of those visual tools and now put them in the hands of hundreds or thousands of different agents. So the possibilities are so much more vast of what they could be doing. So
for sure,
it'd be interesting to go back and see how like agents and kind of this next wave is going to impact art and the whole creative process, as well as innovation and product design. So
yeah. No, agreed. And it just made me think about it too. And we've mentioned it before, like when we started this podcast back in January, like it was a very different landscape at the time. Of course, agents were present, but they weren't as, known. And I think about kind of all of the leaps and bounds that have happened, in this space, even since January. And then you can think about like next year will just be, for all industries. So like for art and for others, how they're using it to help improve their workflows or to think about creativity in new ways. So yeah, we should do it again next year.
We should. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's election day. So get out and vote. It's a big election. Also, just reminding the listeners, please subscribe and check us out on the road, verve.com/events. And, find out if we're in the city coming to you, or let us know if you want us to come to you. We can do that too.
Yeah. So for Seattle and LA, you're going to be with both of us. So we're both making the trip. So 2 days in Seattle, 2 days in LA. Come out. Like, we'd love to meet you in person. And if the city's not on the list, let us know and we'll put it on the list. So
yeah,
excited.
It'll be awesome. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of AI Powered by People. The show is produced by Steve Berkowitz and brought to you by Verve. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday.